My background goes all the way back to birth by Dr. Wood here in town. And I was brought over in my mommy's tummy from in the valley, and she came over to get a abortion of the baby in her tummy, and she had heard that Dr. Wood would do such a thing, and she came over to have it done, and she got here, and he said that he didn't do abortions, but he would be happy to do it for free and find me a good home if she would carry it to term. And so she changed her mind about that and decided to do that. So on February 25th, I was delivered here in Crook County in Prineville by Dr. Wood, and all the rest is history, I guess I would say. They had a time waiting. My dad, Dr. Wood, had actually found a home for 50 kids during the war. I was number 50, and he had a hard time finding a home for me. Everybody's house was filled up, I guess. So when I call her my twin sister, Laura, came in Mom's tummy to her mother's tummy, my adopted mother's tummy, to get delivered. She, in those days, they stayed 10 days in the hospital before they went home, and so it was 10 days. And after she was delivered, they got ready to go home, and Dad hadn't been able to find that place for me, and so he carried me into the room where Mom was with Laura and said, "Shall we take this one with us?" And they did, thank goodness. So that was in 1946, and here I am 79 years later. Kind of amazing when you think about living that long. Dr. Wood died when he was 78, so I've outlived him now. Kind of amazing. He was a pretty healthy guy. Did a lot of exercise and a lot of work in the orchard and a lot of walking and all that sort of thing. I'm looking at a picture of him up there on the wall behind the camera. He got here when Dr. Belknap was here, sort of the first doctor that was here with him, and then several other doctors have joined him. Atkinson and all those joined him, and they started a clinic here, and that clinic's been going ever since. It's kind of amazing to go down by where the clinic was, where I used to go after my music lessons, and get a ride home with Dad whenever he was finished doing whatever he was doing, including a trip by the hospital almost every evening, where he would take care of people up there at the same time, and sometimes a trip out to somebody's house because they didn't have a car to get to the clinic or not. So that sort of started my life as a twin here in Prineville, and from then on, I guess I've just grown up and out. It'll be interesting to see how long I live. I've recently gotten rid of my car because my left eye is getting a little wonky. So that's one of the things about the growing up that you have to learn to live with, is when you get to the point where you start to decrease in total viability. So I'm looking at a quote from Dr. Elon Wood, MD. "Our country has a right to be proud of our hospital, which was built without a cent of federal grants." I remember the process they went through of raising the money from people in town and all around the county, actually, to raise the money for that. I think it was $250,000, if I remember right. And that was built after they had built the first part of the clinic up on the hill. It's not where it is now. It was up on the hill where you go all the way to the top of the hill up Elm Street, and it would be on the left side up there. And they added to it about 4 different times, if I remember right. So that building got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was kind of fun to walk down the hallways and take a look at her as you're walking along and see all the things that were there. And the doors would come out the east side, and that's where most of the cars were parked. And you'd see doctors and patients and nurses and all sorts of things going around that huge building, huge for Prineville at that time. And you could see down to the courthouse at that time, which was where it is now, although not for the new one that has just been built down just a couple blocks from where I live now. It's kind of amazing how big that building is, and they still call it a courthouse. It's fun to think about all of the things that have happened in this town over the years, including converting the old bank building that we're in now into a museum. I remember the effort that went into that by a lot of very dedicated people. Amazing that they can spend that much time, raise that much money, and do things that bring back the memories of people that are no longer here. Including my dad. It's seeing the pictures of the old houses around here that some of them still even exist, like that one right over there. It's on 7th Street. I have been in the basement of that, and it's just stone. It's not concrete. It was never concrete. It's amazing how houses used to be built so that they could be put up quickly and not have to have the famous stuff that we have now, like concrete and insulation and all that sort of thing. Anyway, I was getting out of the 6th grade. It was Saturday after the last day of the 6th grade, and I came home and from the night before and got up the next day thinking, oh, summer's here, it's time to have fun. And Mom said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just going to go outside and have fun. She said, well, we're going on a trip, don't you remember? I said, I don't know about a trip. So she helped me pack a little bag of a shirt and underpants and a t-shirt and a shirt to wear over the top of the t-shirt. And we left for a month and 3 days, or a month and 3 months. I hadn't even said goodbye to any of my friends or anything. Apparently, when I had been at Mrs. McCormick's camp for 6th graders, which was the first year that 6th graders went to camp, my family had had a discussion about going on this trip. So I hadn't been there for the discussion, and I didn't know anything about it. So we were gone for a year and 3 months, and we took a Volkswagen, or a Buick, across the United States, a 1952 Buick. And then Dad gave it to an uncle of mine, and he took it and sold it. And then we got on a boat. We went across the ocean to England, and we got out off the boat in Liverpool and took a train over to London, and Dad picked up our car there a month later. It had been held up in Germany. It was a VW microbus, first one I'd ever seen, and it had been held up in Germany because of a dock worker strike, and they finally got there a month after we were expecting it. So I spent a month in London going to all of the different museums and castles and palaces and all that sort of thing to see all of them. And after we were ready to leave, a month later, it occurred to me that I needed to spend another month in London just because there were so many things to see in London. I mean, it's an amazing, amazing city. Incredible things. We went from there north to Scotland, and then we came back down in Scotland when we got on a boat and went across to Norway. And we drove to the far as you can go north in Norway, which is far north as you can go north in all of Europe. And then drove south through Finland and went to Vienna, Austria. And in Vienna, Austria, I went to school for 3 months in a Austrian school where they spoke only English, except they were learning to speak. They spoke only German. They were learning to speak English, and they all wanted to speak English. So whenever they talked to us, my sister and I, they spoke in English, and of course I was trying to learn German. I don't know why, but I spoke as much German as I possibly could. And just so you know, the hardest part about German is there's 2 words for you. One is du and one is sie. And if you call an adult du, you have offended them. And I offended a lot of adults, I can tell you. And then we went on south down into Rome and across, and spent Christmas that year in Tunis. And then we went back up north on another boat and went to Spain and Portugal and up through France and across the north part of Switzerland and back to Vienna. And then in the spring of that year we took off again and went down through Greece and took a boat down to Egypt and visited the pyramids and got to see Tutankhamun's tomb, which had just been discovered about a year before we were there. And then we took the Volkswagen around the edge of Africa and got off in East Africa and went from there to the Belgian Congo and got to see the pygmies, which was the most fantastic people I've ever met in my life. They were all shorter than me, and I hadn't finished growing. I'm not very tall now, so you can imagine how short they were. They did a religious dance for us, and it was phenomenal to watch. I've never seen people with bigger smiles and happier smiles than the pygmies in Africa. And then we went from there and stayed for a week with some missionaries. I got to know the boy that was the son of the missionaries pretty well, and I really miss him almost every day. I wished I could have seen him again. I don't even know if he's still alive. Here I am at 79, and I'm wondering if he's still alive. I hope he is. He was a great guy. We went on down to Cape Town and took a boat back up and got out in Boston and drove back across the United States in a Volkswagen microbus, just like we had in Europe, and got back here, and that's the car I learned to drive in when I hit 15. Of course, I actually knew how to drive most things because I'd been raised on the farm, and we, of course, had to drive the pickup to feed the cattle, and we had to drive the tractor to till the orchard and till the fields and all that sort of thing. So turning the wheel and learning how to back up and not hit things and all that kind of stuff was part of what you grew up with. It was kind of amazing when you think about it at my age. that I was able to drive at the age of 6, which is when we moved out to the ranch. At the age of 6, I was driving a pickup so that my brother could throw the bales off and the cows could eat them every morning and every evening, for which I was paid 50 cents a month, $6 a year. It's kind of when you think about the difference in what money is worth these days, it's kind of hard to contemplate and hard to understand. It's amazing. I mean, $1 now is worth about a penny then. Or if you wanted to trade for same worth, it would be about what it was. Kind of blows me away when I think about it. So around the farm, my brother and I did, in quotes, the work. Dad would tell us what to do, and then he would go to work at the clinic and at the hospital, and my brother and I would do the planting and so on like that. After we got big enough that we were in school all day, then Dad would hire somebody to come out and actually do the things that we couldn't do during the day. And that always ended up being kind of a nice thing to come home to, because then we didn't have to do the work. It was already done by people that really knew what they were doing. So, yeah, growing up in Prineville was so much different then than it is now, because most of my friends lived on farms. My dad had to spend most of his time at doing his medical practice. Doing medical practice in those days was different because each doctor typically had their own nurse that was key to providing proper service and proper care. I don't know, frankly, I don't know how Dad did it. It's just amazing that he was able to do all of that and keep the farm going and all that sort of thing, and spend so much time at doing what he felt he needed to do at the church and help build the new church, the new Baptist church, and all that sort of thing. It was just, he just had the ability to keep moving and going and going and going and going, and would get by on a couple of hours of sleep and then go right back at it the next day. I don't know how somebody does that. And of course, in those days, computers had not yet been invented. They may have had some thoughts about using machines for doing things, but the computers weren't invented, and so computers had to be implemented or integrated into the medical field. And later I was an architect, and we had to integrate computers into the architectural field, and pretty soon if you didn't do your practice on a computer, you couldn't print it out very easily because you had to draw everything first instead of just being able to print it out of a computer. Amazing how life has changed in the last 25, 35 years. First computer I had was 1982, if I remember right, and that was a DOS computer. And then they came out with the Windows computer, and of course Macintosh came along, Apple. And I'm a real believer in the Apple just because it's so much easier to use than DOS machines or Windows machines. But it's amazing how they have totally taken over the architectural professions and the medical professions in terms of dealing with anything except the person-to-person between the doctors, the nurses, and the patients. Back in the day when Dad was practicing, he would have more nurses than anything else running around the hospital. taking care of people that were sick or dying or whatever. It's amazing how many of those women were just wonderful, wonderful people. Smiles that you could never forget, and the willingness to give anybody needed a hug, and just really taking care of the needs of people that goes far beyond the medical needs that we think of today. After we got back from our trip through Europe and Africa, I was in the 8th grade, and I had to reintroduce myself to most people that were in school, because you know how much you change from the 7th grade to the 8th grade. All of a sudden you're taller and you're got whiskers and all sorts of things. Everybody looks different, and they've learned different things than I have in that year. So I had to figure out what I didn't know that they knew, and then learn that. I mean, it's amazing what you learn when you're traveling around in a car with a family of 8 people in the car, and what people learn in school when they haven't traveled around and maybe haven't met anybody new or anything like that. So a whole new life of people that have matured and grown up and figured out things for themselves. And it blows me away when I think about the difference between when I left at the end of the 6th grade and when I got back in the beginning of the 8th grade. And some of those people I still knew, and I still know today even. We try to have reunions every year, which is kind of fun. But reunions now are a whole lot different than when we were young. When we were young, we'd get together and we'd play games, softball and baseball, and even when I was in college, we started doing soccer, which was called football in Europe. I had found out what football was by a friend of mine when I was in Vienna, and he had taken me across the street to see the football field that they had just put in over there, and we kicked the round ball around a little bit, and my sister couldn't find me, and I had her quarter, which is what she needed to get home in, so she had to walk home through Europe, or through Vienna. It took her about 3 hours to get home. I don't know if any of you have ever ridden a Straßenbahn, a streetcar, but it's a whole lot easier than walking, believe me. At that time, it was 1 shilling to ride from the school to a couple blocks from the house. 1 shilling was the minimum size of coins in Vienna, and it was worth about 3 cents. So for 3 cents, you could actually ride from the school that we were going to and get home. That's kind of amazing when you think about it. Now it's probably a couple of bucks at least. Cars in those days, you know, a Volkswagen microbus had 4 cylinders that had 32 horsepower, and that's what we drove all the way through Europe, all the way through Africa. And then that's what I learned to drive in when I was a sophomore in high school. And driving on the highway is a whole lot different than driving on the farm, where on the farm all you have to do is miss the animals instead of miss the cars that are going crazy down the street. It's kind of amazing. Then I went to University of Oregon. When I was a senior in high school, I started taking drafting classes from a local teacher, and he sort of instilled in me understanding of what drafting was really for and how people designed houses using things like drafting and that sort of thing. It was kind of amazing. And so I liked the drafting, so I went to college, University of Oregon, to learn to be an architect. And by the time I left there, I was teaching the classes instead of taking the classes, because most of the teachers didn't know enough about architecture to really teach it. It was kind of amazing that they were supposedly architects and didn't even know how to teach people young like me to be an architect. But architecture is something that everybody practices different than other people. It's kind of amazing. Not like doctors, where you have to follow the medical procedures so you don't get sued. Dad was good at that. I can't imagine how he was able to figure out how to do all of the things he did and heal people day after day after day after day. I mean, for years on end. Some of them were sick for a long time. I think about people that are sick that long, and I think about when I was 40 years old and realized that I had just passed out when I was playing hockey, and fallen off my bench where I had sat down to rest. And I told my mom about it, and she told my dad about it, and they took me in to see a doctor, and turns out I needed to have heart surgery. So I learned about dying that way, and I learned about living that way as well. So you wake up after having had your chest pulled open and you hurt from top to bottom, and you can't figure out what in the world is going on, and you can't figure out why, you can't remember what happened when it was going on, and your whole life is sort of disrupted, and you have to sit around and act like a 2-year-old for being a bad boy while you're trying to recover. Being sick that bad reframes how you view life and how you perceive life even. It makes you realize that when people are sick, they really need help. And I didn't realize that until I was 40 years old and had the open heart surgery. It really made me respect Dad's ability to do that so well, and Mom's for that matter. She was a nurse until Laura and I came along. She actually worked with my other siblings, 3 of them staying at home as well. And I don't understand yet how you can be both a nurse or a doctor and have kids at home. Luckily, I wasn't ever having to do that. I became an architect instead of a doctor because I knew that I didn't want to have to deal with what my dad had to deal with day after day after day. Architecture is understanding how buildings go together. I decided the best way to do that was to build a house for myself. So while I was going to college in architecture, I was also working at the building department as a plans examiner full-time. I decided to build a house for myself so I could learn how the whole thing fit together, how parts of a building fit together, and how it felt to build a place that you're going to live in yourself, and learn to perceive things as it is standing partially finished. It's kind of amazing when you think back about it, more amazing than when you're actually doing it, because you actually see this physical structure that you are putting together evolve around you, and you begin to realize that, well, I could change this and I can change that, or I can rebuild that and make it better, or you never feel like you're quite getting to where it's perfect. And the biggest thing about architecture is you have to learn that nothing is perfect. It all can be re-improved after it was completed, or after it was built, or after you cooked it, or whatever, if it's food or if it's whatever it is. So learning to do work in a house that you've built, you have to teach yourself not to get distracted by what you didn't do right the first time, because you still have to get the work done, drawing people's houses and plans and buildings for people to work in, and all of the things that are necessary. And you sometimes forget to take care of some things that you should be taking care of, like, what if a friend decides to steal money from you? Like $30,000, which is a quarter of what the house was going to be worth when it was finished. So I was about 2/3 of the way done with my house, and a guy that I considered to be a friend of mine stole $30,000 from me. Well, all of a sudden you can't finish the house you're working on, so you have to decide what else you're going to do. So my wife and I talked it over, and we decided we'd go up to Alaska. So we went up to Alaska. I was up there for 14 years, and I learned a whole lot about building, where you have to be very, very concerned about cold and snow and rain, so that it doesn't affect you negatively. That was a real learning experience. I worked all the way up and down the Aleutian Islands, all around the state of Alaska. It was an incredible time in my life to view all of that. Most people don't realize how big Alaska is. They think of it as the size you see it on the television screen when they put a little tiny portion of it on there. In reality, if you put one part of Alaska in Seattle, the other part would stretch all the way to Hawaii. I'm sorry, to Florida. And it's actually bigger than Texas by a factor of about 3. 3 Texases would fit inside of Alaska. It's kind of amazing when you think about the people that grew up there and they had to walk from one place to another back in the day, hundreds of years ago. And they got there by crossing a bridge from Asia. When you think about the size of Alaska and having to walk across the Aleutian Islands, which are about 1,000 miles long, it's kind of amazing that they ever survived. And that's the people that spread out all the way across North America and South America. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people that have done that and survived. Blows me away when I think about having to go through Alaska, and it's sometimes the coldest I ever saw it up there was 105 below zero. That's cold enough that if you aren't moving, you freeze in place. It's an amazing situation, an amazing sensation when you're fighting cold. I don't care what you've got on for clothes, underwear, long johns, it's not enough. And if the wind is blowing at all, it's definitely not enough. We actually built 150 houses up in Fairbanks, Alaska, for the federal government for housing for people to live in while their spouses were working in the military. And that was kind of an amazing project. And then we decided we were going to go back down to Anchorage, and it took us 8 hours to drive as fast as we could drive from Fairbanks to Anchorage, which most people think of as being like going from Prineville to Bend, but it's not. It's a long ways. So I retired when I was about 68 and moved back to Prineville, and I've been back in Prineville ever since. Have very much enjoyed getting to know people here again, getting to see the town as it's developed, and met the people that were currently running the museum, and do a phenomenal job, I have to say. This museum is incredible. Every time I come in, there's more things to see. In any case, it's been nice talking to you.